Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro, and did you know that 2024 is over, and therefore it's time for best films of 2024?
Let's just start out maybe with some shout-outs, films that didn't make the 10. Hundreds of Beavers, Love Lies Bleeding, Baby Girl, Nosferatu, Daughters, Universal Language, Red Rooms. Never talked about Red Rooms. That was actually a pretty sick movie. It's What's Inside, went on to Netflix. Whatever happened to that amazing Sundance theatrical experience that other people won't have?
People didn't like the movie as much because they watched it on their TV, and I firmly believe this.
Yeah.
I really believe that the movie would have been a bigger deal if
it was a blast. Night Bitch, fuck you. Fuck you, Night Bitch. 9 out of 10. Memoir of a Snail almost was in the top 10, but I watched it twice and I got just a little bit didn't hold up as well. Layla from Sundance. No one really saw that, but that was great. Queer movie. Challengers, saw that again. Didn't quite make it. The Brutalist, saw that twice and that didn't quite make it either. For some reason, just me and the Brutalists aren't quite clicking. There's just something about us. We're just not. And Dee Dee, which another Sundance film that I really loved. I feel like I was biased with how much nostalgia I had for the time period that it was exploring, so...
You're supposed to be biased with nostalgia.
I am supposed to be biased, yeah.
That's kind of the point of nostalgia, is it's supposed to be catered to you.
But I remember, and maybe I'm a hypocrite now, because I remember watching Air and going why do we need to see all the period stuff just because you got the Wheaties box?
Honestly though, I remember I watched Apollo 10 and a half from Richard Linklater and I felt nostalgic even though it wasn't my childhood. So I think there is something about nostalgia captured right that, maybe goes beyond whether or not you relate to it.
Well, this one in particular was 2000s nostalgia, which I haven't seen in films as much. That actually captured something that, hasn't been explored too much yet.
My honorable mentions are Conclave, A Different Man, Queer, Universal Language, Dune Part 2, Daughters, the documentary Daughters, Night Bitch, Challengers, and Sing Sing. I really would have liked to give Universal Language another watch. So what's your number 10, friend?
My number 10 is Good One. Good One is a very understated film. I think one that is pretty underseen. I'm not sure how many people would connect with it in the same way that I did. Something about the way it immersed me in a kind of an ordinary experience and then kind of slapped me on the side of the head and I didn't expect it. I didn't see it coming. Just really stuck with me. And I like the way that it explores an event that is very small, but also very large. I felt like this film did something that other films did not, and I think India Donaldson's screenplay especially was particularly astute in how it observed normal interactions and made the movie feel kind of like a hangout buddy movie that you could just sort of kick back and enjoy the dialogue, enjoy the humor, the banter. And I just have a lot of respect for that film. It's a great low budget film.
My number 10 is His Three Daughters. It's been a while since I saw this at TIFF 2023, I think, but the three lead performances here and even a couple of the supporting performances are just so strong and were some of my favorites of the year, especially Natasha Lyonne's performance has really stuck with me. The movie had me in tears probably more than most movies that I saw last year, so you gotta give it a lot of credit for that. It was a really beautiful story of these estranged sisters connecting. I love how the dad represents something different to each sister, and the dad being off screen the whole movie kind of leaves it to the audience to piece together this man in his three different forms of who he was. The movie was thought-provoking, very emotionally powerful. The writing's a bit stagey, but if you can move past it, you're in for a real treat.
My number 9 is Conclave. After the first viewing at TIFF, I did not expect this to be a top 10er for me personally. I thought, that's a great dad movie. It's a good Oscar movie, but I'm not sure that it's my favorite movie with me personally, but I watched it 3 times in total. And I don't watch very many movies 3 times because I feel like I know when a movie's worth a second watch, and then at that point, 3 times is kind of risky for me. I might actually like the movie worse. And Conclave was one that stood up on all 3 viewings and held its head very high. Especially the last viewing, watching the characters feel kind of ungrounded in their morality and everybody is this sort of hypocrite. Everything comes down to a power play. Yes, the characters do have morality that we can root for, but they also seem to betray their own principles. I think this resembles the world of politics so astutely. People sort of present their principles as oh, this is how I will behave, and then they don't really act that way. Ultimately, what is more important is the gain that you can get, with principle. They're sort of a means to an end, your principles. And I just thought the script was so sharp. I really was lingering on every single line. Trying to unravel the backstory was just enjoyable and fun and intellectually stimulating for me. Shout out to the Brutalist. And I love trying to figure out the power dynamics which aren't spelled out for you explicitly, especially in regards to Sister Agnes. I really felt like I was trying to get exactly what her role was. Like, how exactly did she play a role in determining, who the new pope was, or like who gets kicked out. It's a whole lot of fun for me, and I also have to say there's some great performances in here. Despite the not very much screen time, Rossellini deserved that nomination. I mean, she ate that role up, and Ralph Fiennes has never been better.
My number 9 is No Other Land. This is the most recent 2024 movie that I'd seen. This was just so upsetting. I think this captured something larger than the Israeli-Palestine conflict to me, which is conflicts where larger military forces are forcing people to leave their home, and like this has happened throughout history. It's happening in other countries, and it made me understand how people would choose to remain in that place and keep up the fight even when it seems like it would be so much easier to just give up and leave. This puts a lot of disgusting practices that the IDF is doing in just broad, plain daylight. It's unfortunate that this movie was controversial whatsoever. It was a very infuriating movie, and the movie seems to at times want to show you the resilience that they can even possibly muster in the face of what they're up against. And then it also feels just so completely hopeless at times, like especially when the movie ended.
My number 8 is Dune Part 2. You know why this is in the top 10. We all know Dune Part 2 is fucking amazing. This is one of the very finest cinematic spectacles of last year, and I remember being in the theater just feeling like my heart rate increasing, almost like my whole body quivering in that IMAX theater, that 70 millimeter IMAX experience, riding the worm. This is the main reason why I think Dune is phenomenal, is just the editing, the sound, the score, just grabbing hold of you and shaking you, giving you a visceral experience. On top of that, the story is great. I think this was a huge improvement from Dune Part 1. Even though it feels like the film's mainly praised for spectacle, I think the story here and the screenplay was really well fleshed out. We all had that debate, right, on Twitter. We all saw it about, Paul Atreides, is he like a king, or is he, stepping completely outside of his boundaries? Is he backstabbing these people? And we all know what the answer is, but I like that the movie was just subtle enough that it left some people seeming to misunderstand that message, but I think it rang through pretty clearly. Dune's a movie for the ages. Like, when this thing gets re-released in 10 years, I might have to get back into the movie theater to experience that again.
My number 8 is The Brutalist. I've watched this movie twice, and the second watch improved it for me. Like Tar a couple of years ago, I just find that the movie is so immersed in the details of this man's life. And when you're immersed like that, you'll watch a movie for 3.5 hours. You just will. Adrian Brody gave maybe my favorite lead performance of this year. The pain behind his eyes that is just prevalent in every scene is something that has stuck with me. You gotta love a film that tries to capture that old Hollywood ambition and putting spectacle back into, the drama. But I also found this movie to be really thought-provoking, and there are some times where I feel like I'm kind of at a distance from the movie and I'm not sure if I'm clicking with it. And there are other times where I feel like the movie does capture something really interesting and devastating about the pursuit of greatness in America and the relationship between the patron and the artist. The score is also maybe the best score of the year. So there's like a few elements of this movie that are just some of the greatest, things. We've had long discussions about the movie. We've actually argued about the movie and like if it's saying, what it thinks it is and things like that. And I would take that as a good sign. I've had fun debating and discussing this movie throughout the years. Number 7 is Sing Sing. And this is funny. I actually, when I saw this at TIFF, I think I gave it a 7 out of 10. And then, I kind of sat in the movie for like almost, a year before I got to see it again. And then I saw it again in the theater. And I was like, I don't know what the hell was wrong with me. Like, this is a great film. It's such an emotional and powerful film that I think everybody should see. And it's really a shame how this was left out of the Best Picture category, because it's exactly the kind of film that should be honored because of its raw power and ability to move the audience. This film is just about the tenderness inside of all human beings, and we forget that incarcerated people are humans as well. And I just love the way it brings humanity to these people when, everything in their world is trying to strip that away from them and make them unhuman. And it's got amazing performances from both Clarence Macklin and Coleman Domingo and the entire ensemble. So this is such a special film. Definitely a top 10er. My number 7 is The Beast, which is a movie I've not talked about on this channel, but that has grown on me the more that I sit with it. I wasn't even sure how I was feeling about this movie for half the runtime. I was kind of in and out of whether or not I was loving it or not, but ultimately I think that this has many characteristics of a great film. For one, I think the commentary on artificial intelligence is really spot on and something I don't think I've seen before, where it's critiquing the neutrality and the numbness of artificial intelligence, comparing it to like a neutral face on a person, propelling us towards a future where we can eliminate suffering, but also eliminate like the great joy of the human flawed experience. Across the three timelines that we find Léa Seydoux and George Mackay's characters in, there is this fatalistic romance where they're drawn to each other, despite each storyline ending in the same tragedy. But it's still that like spark and that need to go towards something, that romantic drive that flawed human beings have to be driven towards the wrong things, that kind of makes us human and also causes our great suffering. And it's a movie that yearns for that world over something sterile that, like, you know, this artificial intelligence represents. I don't even know how much sense that would make to anybody who has not seen the movie. I don't know, that last shot where she's like screaming at his face, that's chilling. That shit was chilling. There's some amazing, like, glitchy editing in the movie that I loved. And even though the movie is kind of tonally uneven, and there were even parts where I was like, oh, I don't even know how I feel about, like, George Mackay's performance or, like, the tone in this scene. Just overall, I think that there was so much great going for the movie, and it was very thought-provoking. And it's a movie that I'd be happy to watch again. And I can see why some people are really shouting this movie out, especially some critics are like, hold on, this is maybe even one of the best of the decade. And it's like, well, we'll see upon rewatches if we're really there, but I think this movie is special.
My number 6 is A Real Pain, and also a film that I saw at Sundance and didn't think it would be my top 10, and then gave it a rewatch and thought that's easily a top 10er for me. I felt very personally connected to it because I identify with the central sort of conflict between the guilt you feel for having lots of comfort and a privileged upbringing, and then putting that against the backdrop of suffering, you know, especially in an age when it feels like there are many modern comforts, enough that they should stave off the anxiety and depression of a new generation, and yet they don't. And I love how the film doesn't present answers to this central theme it is concerned with. The other thing I love about this is the characters. These might be the most fleshed out, most lovable, and simultaneously flawed duo of characters that I've seen all year. I think this is such a well-written movie from Jesse Eisenberg. My goodness, you know, I had a lot of faith in him from his first film as well. Like, I really liked that film. I think that's worth another visit from people who really love this. And I also think I've just never seen a character portrayed on film like Benji, and it really struck close to home just thinking about people in my life who actually kind of fit certain personality quirks of that character. And I especially like how I identified more with like this Jesse Eisenberg character and was like, oh, I wouldn't really want to be around this like this guy that Kieran Culkin's playing. And then they have that moment where they say goodbye to the tour guide, and it's like Jesse Eisenberg didn't even exist. And even though Kieran Culkin was like an asshole and he was abrasive the entire trip, everybody's gonna remember that guy, and they're gonna think fondly of him for somehow. Like, it just feels like this slap in the face. That little moment when he says like, oh, yeah, you too, goodbye, after giving Benji a hug, was like, it was so perfect and so accurate. I think it's just extraordinary writing. And, you know, the film also like made me cry. Like, what else do you need? I thought this is a great movie.
My number 6 is Hundreds of Beavers. This was a blast. It's an absolute blast, and also just made me feel invigorated about cinema and about what movies can be. Because even though it borrows from, you know, slapstick comedies and cartoons and video games, it's really its own thing. And I guess it could only be its own thing when it's borrowing from all three of those things at once. But also just the scrappy, low-budget nature and how well that plays into the movie's charm. You can see the seams just enough, but it also works to get lost in. I just got so sucked into the movie's logic and all of its weird little rules and games, and I was surprised at how it played off of itself and built upon those ideas and these jokes throughout the runtime. It is just a completely irreverent movie. There's nothing deep about it, and it's not trying to be anything but what it is. And I kind of love it for that anyway. It's the product of people who are just brimming with like fun ideas to put onto screen. I don't know, it was just so infectious. And like, for a movie that is so irreverent, it has stayed with me just for being the little unique gem that it is.
My number 5 is No Other Land. 2024 and 25 for me really feel like a pivotal moment where I'm just like, oh wait, just pure fucking evil is just running rampant and exists. And I don't know why, where, or at what point I just thought that was like evaporated. I guess that's just my upbringing or how I've been taught history or something. But the sort of like blunt, in your face atrocities, propaganda that occurs under the watch of like liberal democracies is astonishing. And the United States is slipping slowly into its own heavily propagandized sort of authoritarian whatever we're gonna be or whatever we're becoming. I think this film was important just to see on full display exactly what kind of conflict we're dealing with when it comes to Israel's relationship with Palestine. And it's one that, it's not about the Gaza war. So I think immediately that should like calm people down a little bit if they have like a preconception of what they're going into. I think anyone could agree, unless you were whispered many lies to, that what happens in this film was obviously horrible. And I think it sets the stage well for understanding like how Israel is viewing Palestine. And I really don't believe this is propaganda if anybody is hesitant to go into it for that reason. Like, it does not feel that way whatsoever. This one is not only visceral and immediate, but has characters that you come to know and be invested in with their stories. And something that really stays with me is just watching the Palestinian sort of protagonist just hitting his hookah over and over because he's just so damaged, and the toll that is taken on people's psyches from events like these is often understated. The film just made me think like there's just some deep fucking evil out there. I'm glad this thing won the Oscar. It kind of prevailed against the odds/establishment, didn't it?
My number 5 is Anora. This has been obviously showered in a lot of praise already, but I really love Sean Baker as a filmmaker. This is possibly his most explosive movie yet. It really takes you on a wild and loud journey. It has hilarious highs, and then that just final note at the ending where it all comes crashing down and the curtains pulled back is just a brilliant way to end the movie. Just the jarring tonal shift that it leaves you with, and the way that the impact of that moment colors the rest of the film. The movie kind of makes a screwball comedy out of these characters who are all subservient to money in some way. And many have criticized the movie because it's hard to see the humanity in the characters at times, because they're just like operating on like, well, I have to do this and this is what I have to do, but that's also the point of the movie. Sometimes that like mind numbing, like, well, where like are these people? Like, I want to reach out to them and like see, what's underneath. That feeling actually is reinforced by the end of the movie. And I think that what the movie achieves is really special. I think it's really well shot, very well directed from Sean Baker, who remains one of the most exciting filmmakers. And, the Florida Project may be my favorite. I think Anora does lag a little bit in that second act, as many have said, but it's a great movie from a great filmmaker. What can you say? My number 4 is The Substance. I wish everybody was in my Cannes screening room for this film. Many people were there unwittingly, that they didn't know what the heck that was going to become. They didn't know that it was going to be nasty and gross. They didn't know that it would be funny, outrageous, and just on like a pure fun experience alone. The screening that I had at Cannes in like a 1,000-person theater was fucking unforgettable. I really think that's where the film works the best, it is a hell of a ride. That being said, I understand how people think it puts its commentary secondary to that thrills aspect. Like that is a valid criticism, and it's also a valid criticism that the movie like makes you go like, oh, at like her body, right? And like it's kind of working against itself in that way. And even though I think that's very fair, I just can't help but like love the movie for what it is. I think this is like one of the most well executed films in terms of its production design, cinematography, sound, editing. Like, it feels immaculately storyboarded to produce like the maximal visceral response from the audience, even though it kind of does like eat away at its own sort of message. I think the fact that it was constructed like this made more people see it. It made more people interested. It got the film Oscar nominations, and it eventually drew attention to the message that the film is mainly trying to hammer over you. It's one of those films too where like I just did not see an awards campaign coming for this, but the fact that it got in and was like Booby's first Oscar contender was amazing to me, and I am very happy that other people seem to discover the film in just the way that I did. My number 4 is A Real Pain. This got even better for me at my New York Film Festival screening. It has some of the most well-written characters I've seen all year. I think Jesse Eisenberg is just a hell of a screenwriter. And it seems to me that his approach is to try to explore the tension between all these weird gray areas that he overthinks. And then he puts them into scenes that are simultaneously funny and conflicting. And I kind of agree with this character, but I also feel weird about that. And this to me is a formula for just an exhilarating movie experience. I just felt deeply engaged with this movie and its characters because it's always provoking deeper feelings and weird questions and cringe, and I think that's where the juice of movies lies, perhaps. And what else can you do with all these awkward, human experience tensions other than just let them play out on screen and not really try to answer them? I think that's one of the great parts about this movie, is it doesn't seem to try to resolve its tensions. But it's a really insightful movie about how people internalize and externalize their traumas. It's very easy to see yourself and other people in these two characters. I felt that they both represented, two sides of myself, perhaps, and, struggling with openness and outwardness. I just found this movie to be absolutely exhilarating, hilarious, and moving, and what more do you want?
My number 3 is Nickelboys. I found this to be an incredibly moving portrait of a friendship so deep that you intertwine your soul with someone voluntarily. I think that's sort of the core that I came away with from this film. That, and I just think there are so many memorable scenes and moments that really stick with me and kind of dug into my soul. Many of those are scenes with Ingenue Ellis, and the way that character is kind of burned into your brain. And I think her performance is one of the finest this year for that reason. I also want to shout out the boxing scene, which I think is incredibly well edited, both visually and sonically. The way that scene is building a tension where we're both rooting for an outcome and also absolutely terrified if that outcome happens. And on top of that, the way the film is shot, of course, it's this immersive experience that makes you feel like you're living inside of somebody's memories. I think Ramel Ross and Jomo Frey are bringing some of the most fascinating intellectual ideas in a modern African-American film movement into this film as a sort of response to how African Americans are generally portrayed, and saying no, we're not going to portray people in this light, especially when dealing with a subject matter where there are many atrocities, where you have to tiptoe around this fact that you're going to witness people in some terrible situations, and there's an inherent danger in that white America is desensitized to witnessing African Americans in those situations. I think the POV is designed to subvert that. And I do feel like Ramel Ross has brought us one step closer in terms of what film is capable of accomplishing.
My number 3 is The Substance. This is really the 4DX cinema experience right here. I don't know if there's another movie that I think compares to the level of roller coaster that this movie's on. I mean, there's a select group, but it's a very small handful, I think. Corley Farjad just bombarding the audience with these odd wide-angle compositions and eye-popping colors in the production design and costuming. It's just such an aggressive, in-your-face movie that I think advances on, what directors like Darren Aronofsky bring in their maximalism. I feel like it kind of takes that to a whole new level. And Corley Farjad's sensibilities are so unique, the goofy, over-the-top comedy combined with the gross-out thrills, and somehow managing to find an emotional core that really resonates at times. Maybe not so much in the end. I mean, if there's one thing I think this movie could have done better, I think it could have come back to that emotional core by the end of the movie, because I feel that it was a bit lost. It was very strong at points, like that scene in the mirror. She's walking such an interesting tightrope, though, because my initial reaction to that scene where Dennis Quaid gets right up to the urinal, and the dialogue is so on the nose and it's so over the top for him to be a disgusting man. It kind of subverts your reaction to be oh, that's a little over the top, by him being right in front of the camera. And it's oh wait, but the movie's playing into the over the top, and it enters into the territory of the psychological, I think. And I did think that the movie had a lot to say about the way that we view our bodies and the danger of viewing our bodies as separate from ourselves when it comes to, disordered eating and beauty standards and things like Ozempic or plastic surgery. I mean, all of that is well embedded within this movie. And I just felt astonished throughout the entire runtime at some of the shit that Coralie Farjat's pulling here with the sound design and the cinematography, which I think was criminally overlooked this year. I feel like I haven't seen a movie shot like this ever, so it has stuck with me in many ways, I'll say that.
My number 2 is Anora. I've seen Anora twice now, and I had a great experience at Cannes where the screen just cut to black, absolutely no music, just dead silence, and I remember like just feeling overcome with emotion. And I was like, wow, I just get this movie. It totally clicked with me. And I was afraid that it would lose me, in the middle. I was like a little bit worried, like, oh, are we going to get like the substance here? Or is this just that like slapstick sort of romp? And it's absolutely like a layered film. I think it's an excellent critique of capitalism without hitting you over the head with what it is saying. And it's more about like a look at how our relationship with capitalism affects how we view ourselves, and the relationship it has with our own soul. Her real name is Anora, but the name she goes by is Annie, which also ties into like her profession. And people don't really like see anything but the profession. And I did remember talking with someone who at Cannes did not like the film as much as everybody else. And I think the key thing that was missing was like we reflected on the film and the scene when she is insisting that the men were going to assault her. She was not just doing that as a tactic to like get out of a situation. She was just genuinely like afraid for her life. And then like, what does that say about how she views like other people relating to her body? And then we watch her learn that not every person views her that way. Maybe there is like a way of seeing beyond like your body as a source for capital. It also shines a light on who Annie really is and like where she might be coming from when it comes to her relationship with men. All of which is not explicitly said. And I think that's the brilliant thing about Anora is like, the movie sort of plays different than what her experience is. And like knowing that you were kind of divorced from that during the film almost makes you feel like the deeper tragedy at hand. Like you yourself almost like overlooked the fact that this was like a very vulnerable, scared, young woman. Like the way that Sean Baker kind of pulls off that feels kind of like a magic trick to me. And I did see the layers of this film get lost on many people who just like experienced it on video on demand. But we got to make sure that Anora is not forgotten for being like a great ass movie, one whose meaning does not get diluted or lost on multiple viewings. I personally believe this is Sean Baker's strongest effort, and it deserved every Oscar it got.
My number 2 is I Saw the TV Glow. I am a big fan of We're All Going to the World's Fair. The second time I watched that movie, it resonated really deeply with me and on an emotional level that I didn't really fully get on that first viewing. I've been pumped for what they would do next, and I Saw the TV Glow absolutely lived up to everything I'd hoped for. I feel like Jane Schonbrun is mining the depths of their soul and putting an experience onto film that I feel that we just don't really get in many other places. They seem to be in a really interesting place as like a high profile trans filmmaker for showing what like a movie about the trans experience can be. And in order to create that language, you really have to think outside the box. The way that the cinematography transforms everyday environments like the school hallways to become something more liminal, and these spaces like the, Dave and Buster's type arcade, really taking these familiar environments and painting them as oversaturated suburban hellscapes. That birthday party scene at the end, that shriek into the void of being stuck in a purgatory of a life that is just not who you are on the inside, is hellish. It only became stronger for me on a second viewing. I'm not here to say whether or not it's like a flawless or perfect movie, but it's damn memorable and emotionally resonant and inventive cinema.
My number 1 is I Saw the TV Glow. Really no other film for me has beat this one in terms of originality, in terms of giving me a story that I really feel like I have not seen before. And like many of these films, it gave me an unforgettable experience. It does what I want horror films to do, which is just leave you in like the worst possible place, like leave you in the most horrifying landscape. And just let you sit there and linger in that. I feel most horror tries to resolve the story for you so that you don't like come away feeling just absolutely awful by destroying the monster, for example. But in this film, the monster is at large. I think as a trans story, this makes it all the more impactful to watch how deeply you could suffer should you not choose that alternative path, the one that you know is closer to who you are and your identity? The film sank deeply under my bones. On a stylistic level, I think Jane Schonbrun is absolutely one of a kind. This is a hypnotic and almost psychedelic experience with the way that they play with sound design, the way the characters like look into the camera and seem to be hypnotizing you, then the haunting rendering of the 2000s era malaise. I especially love how the villain is fleshed out here with Mr. Melancholy, the Midnight Realm. I feel like it gives language to like one of the most deep and utter horrors, which is that there's like this extraterrestrial force like messing with your memories and convincing you that everything is fine and that the world you're living in is like totally okay, transforming your perceptions when meanwhile it's just feeding you lies with the Luna juice. You know, what an inventive, creative film. Made me more excited to see Jane Schonbrun's next film, perhaps, than any other director in this list. And I think it actually might be the only like 10 out of 10 film that I saw last year. Even though on the third viewing of this, I did feel like not every little piece added up as well as I would have liked it to, the overall theme here is crystal clear.
My number one movie of the year is Nickelboys. And I don't know like how much it's my number one by, but I don't think there's any moment of any movie this year that had me just like on the floor, mouth agape. The moment where you're kind of wondering, what's this connection between this third person perspective that we're seeing and this first person perspective? And if you've seen the movie, towards the end, you get that moment that smacks the two together. And it absolutely blew my mind. And I was like, I didn't even know you could do that. Nobody had ever thought of that. And the way that it ties together, the emotional themes of the film itself being about the lasting power of ideas and how the core parts of who we are and what we believe can be transferred and passed on to others. You know, when I rewatched the movie, it made me think a lot about Elwood watching Martin Luther King Jr. and how his ideas resonated after his passing. Another moment that stood out to me on rewatch is Anjanou Ellis's character when she's hugging Turner. She says, if I can't hug Elwood, I guess you'll have to do. The way that this resonates on a repeat viewing, I can't even explain to you. The POV style may be challenging at times, but like, how is it not just absolutely worth it, you know? There's so much to be said about the immersive effect it has on the audience and why this choice works for this type of story being told. And there's a lot of deeper ideas that Ramel Ross will talk about in Q&As that I love listening to that I didn't even quite think of when I watched it. There's lots of archival footage in the movie that I could not possibly understand without context being given to me. But despite that, the movie had one of the strongest emotional impacts out of any movie this year. Watching characters stare into the camera really has a powerful effect when done right. The score, absolutely overlooked this year. It was incredible. The sound design, the editing, it rethinks very deeply about what cinema can be, and it's amazing that it works as well as it does. And so that's our top 10 of 2024. 2025 has only just begun, of course. I don't know.
And as a reminder, we have a little favorites feature in Award Expert where you can categorize your favorite movies, your favorite performances, in the same way that the Oscars categorize them. Do Oscars your way. Tell us what you think should have been nominated. This feature is available in Award Expert, and you can go all the way back to the year 1900 before they even had the Oscars if you want. 1,370 of you have made your Best Picture lists, and here's what you would have chosen if you were the Oscars. You'd have Dune winning Best Picture. You'd have nominated Anora, Challengers, The Substance, The Brutalist, Conclave, Sing Sing, Nickelboys, Wicked, and A Real Pain. I think that's a pretty solid list. Good for you. For Best Lead Performance, you all have chosen Mikey Madison to be number 1, followed by Demi Moore, Coleman Domingo, Adrian Brody, Ray Fiennes, Timothy Chalamet for Dune, Zendaya, Cynthia Erivo, Sebastian Stan for The Apprentice, and Fernando Torres for I'm Still Here. And you did a good job not being sexist because it's a 5-for-5 gender split. And you can see more categories like that in the app.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
What films are you mad that we didn't put on our list?